Welcome to another episode of Tales from the Tables with your host, Rob Bradley,
John Charles Ciccarelli,
James Burrows,
and Damien Hallwood.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 48 of Tales from the Tables, a Rolldark podcast. Take 2. Yes, take 2. Last week, my wonderful co-host and I, JC, together recorded what I thought was a great episode, but sadly, technology and the internet had other ideas, and that episode was lost to time and entropy. This week, I'm forging ahead alone. All three of my co-hosts are sadly otherwise engaged, and so we're going to give this a go. And we're going to forge ahead and see what we can find today. We're going to talk a little bit about some tabletop role-playing game news, which includes a saucy dragons-themed novel, a encounter with Elon Musk, and Lord of the Rings finding its way onto D&D Beyond. Yes, you heard that right. It comes full circle. So we're going to dive into the news. We're also going to talk a little bit about some of the tales from my tables over the last couple of weeks as I'm flying solo. But as ever, if you've been listening before and you want to submit your tales from the tables, you can do so. You can send them to me, Damien, at rolldark.co.uk. Let me know what you've been getting up to. You can also message me on the Rolldark Discord. Give us tales from your tables. What adventures you've been getting up to? What villains have you vanquished? What villages have you saved? What poor, downtrodden NPCs have you lifted from destitution and fear? What magic item completely broke your game? Whatever it is, you can get in touch, let us know, and we'll give it a read out on the podcast and share your story with the world. Isn't that cool? First thing, though, we're going to dive into the news. But before we get there, if this is your first time listening and you don't know what on earth Rolldark is, well, let me tell you, dear listener. Rolldark is a professional GM agency where you can go right now via rolldark.co.uk and hire a talented actor, voice artist, and more importantly, GM for private, professional, and corporate games of D&D and other tabletop role-playing games. You can sign up right now for weekly ongoing games. You can even filter it by day to find out which day suits you better. You can hire us for one-shots, themed or otherwise, or even cooler than that, for a monthly subscription, you get access to the weekly drop-in games set in the Rolldark Marches, which is run by a bunch of our talented GMs each week and is an ongoing, persistent campaign where the world and its events are shaped by you and the other players. You can pick your games, join the adventures as they happen. There's a bunch of story threads going on there right now. The folks over there are building towns, settling lands, solving mysteries, and vanquishing monsters. It's a really cool time. I actually haven't had a chance to join the Rolldark Marches myself, as I run 3 games a week for Rolldark. It limits my time, but I would love to get in. I'd love to get in as an NPC, a special guest visitor, or something like that. That would be really cool. So check that out, all on rolldark.co.uk, or you can also head to our Discord and join us there and chat about tabletop role-playing games with us. Cool. With that out of the way then, let's dive into some news on this bright and breezy Friday morning as I'm recording, and we'll see what we've got for you. There's going to be a couple of news articles from our lost episode last week, so we'll cover those as well, so we can at least get that out into the world. We're going to start here. Very soon, Amazon Studios is going to release an anthology series called Secret Level, coming out in December, and it is an anthology series of 3D animation, short films, short episodes, from the creators of Love, Death and Robots from Netflix. TV series created by Tim Miller. Yes, the director Tim Miller. And we got a trailer for their Dungeons and Dragons themed episode. And it's awesome. It's a 40-second snippet of what we're going to see in that adventure, but it looks like we've got a lich, or otherwise undead wizard, riding a bat into battle. We have a gnomish wizard in resplendent purple robes, casting what looks like a flame-based spell, and she's got a big smile on her face as she's doing it. We've got a dwarf who looks like perhaps a monk, and what looks like a Goliath paladin. We also got a snippet of a gold dragon in this trailer, which matches the designs we've seen from the upcoming Monster Manual with their redesigned dragons. More on those later. Really cool to see, and we also know from the previous trailer, which covered all of the episodes in brief, that Tiamat looks to be making an appearance in this show too. So very much looking forward to this. We actually just got a trailer for the Warhammer 40k themed episode as well, which looks... Man, it's a good time to be a nerd. It's a good time to be a nerd and be in this sphere. You can check out those trailers on YouTube or the website formerly known as Twitter and various other places where you get your news on both video games and Dungeons & Dragons. It's a really awesome trailer, and I'm really looking forward to checking out that episode when it airs in December. Speaking of dragons, let's move on to this. A few episodes ago now, me and my co-hosts talked about WizKids showing off their Black Dragon miniature. Again, featuring the brand new, redesigned Black Dragon, which was called a Black Dragon Corruptor. Seems they're getting titles. Well, we now have a new dragon miniature coming, and it is the Red Dragon Tyrant, coming in July. This is a hulking miniature. It's on a 75mm base with an 8-inch wingspan, and it features the red dragon in all its resplendent glory, roaring into the sky, its tail coiled around and its wings half expanded. It has red scales with black affectations across it, almost looking like molten rock, with the sort of molten rock and then the sort of cooled black sort of lava stone sections of it too. And it also has a grey underbelly and wings on the underside, which from the designer's notes is designed to suggest that the dragon can hide in its own smoke as it's flying overhead and makes it harder to spot. This is the level of design theory that they're going into for these dragons, and I'm here for it. I absolutely loved the Black Dragon design with its sort of white skull-like face. This dragon is a little more traditional. It's one of the least heavy departures from the previous design, but it's been plussed. It's the Red Dragon +1, and it looks awesome. You can pre-order this now via WizKids. You can get it in a painted version, just short of $80 at retail, and an unpainted version, if you fancy having a dab hand at it yourself, for just short of $60. So you can check that out at WizKids website, or wait for it to come to your friendly local gaming store, whatever your preference. This looks like the beginning of a collection, and an expensive one at that. Any of you out there that collect miniatures, you know that's an expensive hobby. Well, there's more, and who doesn't want more dragons? Who doesn't want more dragons? And these dragon designs are awesome. So I will be checking these out for sure. One thing we talked about last week has gotten a little more context, and it's a sort of bittersweet tale here. The sweet bit of it, the sugar to help the medicine go down, is that it looks like Wizards are focusing hard on getting D&D video games out there. And not just D&D, Wizards obviously is a huge organization that has a great number of IP under its umbrella, including juggernauts like Transformers. But it seems like they're going to try and be producing at least a video game per year by 2026. And that includes as yet unannounced Dungeons & Dragons video games. Now, we already know, I'm sorry if you didn't know this and you're a big fan, we already know that Baldur's Gate 3 will not be getting a direct sequel, certainly from Larian. They're moving on to their own projects beyond Baldur's Gate. So the massive success of Baldur's Gate has forged them forward to make more video games, but it sadly won't be Baldur's Gate, or at least it won't be Baldur's Gate from Larian. That isn't to say that it won't be Baldur's Gate from a different development studio. There's really very scant details on it other than the fact that they're working on it. Now for the bad news. In an effort to focus more heavily on their video game branch, Wizards is moving away from financing future movies, which means for all of you fans, me included, of Honor Among Thieves, the Dungeons & Dragons movie we got recently, it doesn't look like we're going to get a sequel to that. Certainly not anytime soon. From Wizards' perspective, it underperformed, as has some of their other movies, such as Transformers 1. Both very well received movies critically, from what I've seen. I haven't seen Transformers 1, but it seemed to be lighting people up. They seem to be liking it. And I very much enjoyed Honor Among Thieves, and I know a lot of people did. But according to Wizards, both of those movies and more have underperformed, and so they're gonna shy away from movie production, which is a massive shame because that cast was brilliant, and it's just going to be a shame not to see that group of adventurers go on another daft adventure together. Maybe in the future, if we scream loud enough, start writing your angry emails and tweets now. We shall see. But more video games. We're just rolling on in the tangents here as well. We've got a little bit more on video game-based news from Wizards of the Coast. So, it looks like Wizards of the Coast's branch Archetype Entertainment is going to produce and publish a tabletop role-playing game based on the upcoming sci-fi RPG video game Exodus. This was announced as a video game at the Game Awards last year, and it comes from BioWare devs and is spearheaded by James Olin, who has sort of designed and created Exodus and will be heavily involved in designing the tabletop role-playing game Traveler's Handbook as well. Now, I know the name James Olin quite well because my Monday night game that I run is Odyssey of the Dragonlords from Arcanum Worlds, and he is one of the lead creators and writers on that book, and it's excellent. It's an excellent third-party campaign setting for Dungeons & Dragons. There is little word right now as to whether this will be a 5e supplement or a 5e revised supplement, but I assume so, as Arcanum Worlds are known for doing that. They're known for publishing third-party 5e supplements. So the chances are this will be a 5e game. And Exodus sounds pretty cool. I'm a little... if you've listened to the podcast before, you know I'm a little salty that this is a sci-fi role-playing game from the creators of Mass Effect, or at least Mass Effect alums who aren't now making a Mass Effect role-playing game, and we still don't have any news on a Mass Effect role-playing game coming anytime soon. But a sci-fi role-playing game from those creators and those writers should be pretty cool. Exodus is an interesting-looking video game. It was announced that Matthew McConaughey is involved with the project as one of the key cast members, and the story centers around you as the traveler, going out into space and recovering alien technology, and the main antagonists seem to be referred to as Celestials. And Celestials, from what I can gather, are humans from the far future. And how that works is that basically this world is going to take into account time dilation for distant and fast space travel. So, by traveling great distances at great speed through space, as you do so in both the video game and the role-playing game world, it will have an impact on time in the places you visited, as they will progress faster through time than you do. So technology, advancements, friends you make along the way will long since have passed, advancements will grow, civilizations will change or fall in the time that it takes you to jump to different locations. Fascinating concept, and the Celestials are humans in the Centauri system who settled it, and now because of the equivalent of thousands of years of technological development through time dilation are now this super evolved human species akin to, I guess by their name, akin to gods or angels who see humanity as we will play them in the game as little more than primitive apes still scrabbling out into space. There also seems to be a villain called Silicates, which looks to be presumably a silicon-based life form that adheres to humanoids in a symbiotic relationship, and they're referred to when they do that as demons. So very interesting here. We've got a sci-fi setting, hard science fiction by way of time dilation, but we're also getting celestials versus demons. Very fantasy. So it looks to be a sort of melding of the two. And of course, some religious elements in there as well. I don't know how far they will go into that, whether there will be any particularly Christian or otherwise iconography within that. But certainly celestials and demons suggests our typical fantasy understanding of that war. In Dungeons and Dragons, it's classic between angels and devils and demons in things like the Blood War. So I'm really interested to see where this goes. From a video game standpoint, it's a lot of ex-Mass Effect devs as well as other, or BioWare devs, and other devs from big-name studios who have come together to make a brand new IP, which is always a risk. It's always a risk to try a brand new IP, but they've got the gravitas and the skills behind them to make something special. And if Odyssey of the Dragonlords is anything to go by, then I've high expectations for this tabletop role-playing game. And if you're following the game via their website, you can also get early access to the Traveler's Handbook as well. So it pays to get all in on this franchise and take a risk on it. So Exodus, very interesting. Very, very interesting. Presumably it'll be launching at some point in 2025. And if it's successful, we'll presumably get more source books and perhaps cross-world cross-contamination between the video game, which is another interesting concept. If they can do that, is bring both worlds together. So keeping my eyes out for that. Oh, I've just seen the title of my next news item, and it's I'm not going to dwell on this too long, but Elon Musk, yeah, that one. Speaking of space, it's all the tangents all in one. Speaking of space, great segues going on here. Elon Musk has recently tweeted on the website formerly known as Twitter this simple statement: "How much is Hasbro?" Question mark. Now, I don't know how serious he is. This is all breaking sort of round now as I'm recording. It's a fairly recent breaking story. But it seems that the world's richest man had his back put up by recent events with Wizards of the Coast. This all stemmed from a recent situation where another tweet by Musk was fairly scathing towards Wizards of the Coast. And it reads, "Nobody, and I mean nobody, gets to trash E. Gary Gygax and the geniuses who created Dungeons and Dragons. What the," expletive, "is wrong with Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast? May they burn in hell." Wow. Now that led to the "Hey Hasbro, how much?" tweet. And that stemmed itself from a little bit of sort of messy politics going on between writers and creators, all centered around the making of Dungeons and Dragons, the making of the original Dungeons and Dragons. This, we've talked about it before, this big book that goes right back to the genesis of this great game that we all love to play at the tabletop. And it seems that there's been a little bit of controversy around the things featuring Mr. Gygax himself in the book, and some of the cultural insensitivity and perceived misogyny. I haven't read too much into it. I have every reason to believe that there was examples of this, and if you were to read the articles surrounding this, it seems that Mr. Gygax is rather unapologetic about any of that stuff. I may be wrong, but it seems that way. And now, somebody who's been involved in that book, Mark Hearn, has called out Wizards of the Coast, stating that passages within the book that were removed, along with the release of the 2024 Player's Handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide for the anniversary, both erased and slandered Gary Gygax, which prompted Mr. Musk to go ahead and make his scathing comment, and then seemingly follow that up with, how much? Oh, we live in a weird world. Don't we? Don't we live in a weird, weird world? So, it may be that in future episodes of our Fair podcast, we'll be reporting that Elon Musk now owns Wizards of the Coast, presumably renamed to W or something, which, just like Twitter, we won't call it that. We'll call it Wizards. Or this may all just be somewhat tongue-in-cheek. It's hard to know. When you have that much power and that much money to make a statement like that, it is hard to know how serious you're being. Oh, so keep your eyes peeled. And if you can't be bothered with any of it, stay off Twitter. We shall see. Let's get raunchy, shall we? Ooh, let's get raunchy. We reported on this last week, sadly lost, but it seems that Random House is to publish a in-world novelization of Tusk Love. Yes, that Tusk Love from Critical Role. If you know Critical Role, particularly Campaign 2, very well, then you will undoubtedly know the name Tusk Love. In the game, Campaign 2 of Critical Role, Caleb, Liam O'Brien's wonderfully complex wizard character, was looking for books in a bookshop, in particular in the smut section of the bookshop, and that became the creation point for Tusk Love, a romantic/erotic romance novel that then Laura Bailey's incredibly endearing character, Jester Lavore, took a great liking to and mentioned it, featured it many times throughout the campaign. And it even had an Easter egg in The Legend of Vox Machina, which also is getting a 4th season. Surprise, surprise. Not a surprise, it's getting a 4th season, so we can all celebrate that. But this is not the first book being produced from Penguin Random House for Critical Role, but it's the first one that is in world. This is going to be written, it seems, as though it is the actual book, Tusk Love. Now, I don't know how far they're going to take this, and the reason I say that is because Critical Role itself, although it has a great many young fans, isn't strictly a young person's show. There's plenty of profanity, there's plenty of rude humour in it, and of course references to violence and characters using in-world drugs and things like that. It's not strictly a kid's show or a young person's show. I know there are people who have very mature children and trust their kids to watch Critical Role with no consequence, and more power to you. You know your kids, of course. But also, The Legend of Vox Machina, which is, of course, the animated Amazon Prime show based on the first campaign of Critical Role that skyrocketed them to their fame, is also an extremely raunchy and profane show. It doesn't shy away from the profanity of characters like Scanlan Shorthalt and the violence of Grog Strongjaw. It swearing, nudity, rude humor, it's all there. So there's every possibility that this book will go whole hog. Maybe that was the wrong term. It will go whole hog and be a rude novel. It'll be an erotic story. Or perhaps they'll dumb that down a little bit and it will be a little more tongue-in-cheek and reader-friendly. That remains to be seen. But this is being written by New York Times bestseller and author of The Hurricane Wars, Thea Guanzon. And I hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly. So, yes, this will take our characters Oscar and Guinevere on a romantic adventure across the landscapes of Exandria. And it looks like we've got what will presumably be the cover art, I assume, which is Oscar the orc with his black hair with a shock of white through it, lifting up his love interest, Guinevere, into the air by her waist. She has long, flowing white hair and is looking lovingly into his arms beneath a blue sky with a wisp of white cloud, and she has this big sort of orangey red skirt billowing around her. Classic romance novel cover. This will be an interesting read. This will be fascinating. Between this and the novelization of Heir of Strahd, a Curse of Strahd themed book we're also getting into next year, it's going to be an interesting time for novelizations of D&D flavored worlds. So keep an eye out for Tusk Love. If you've yearned for on long nights, long lonely nights, to read the genuine Tusk Love and imagined how that story might go, imagine no further, folks. It's coming and it's real, and you'll be able to read it next year. July also, this is due to be published with a recommended retail of what looks to be $30. So keep an eye out. D&D Beyond. D&D Beyond has been getting a lot of third-party content lately, which is great. This is really great. It's interesting. We've posited this a few times on the podcast, me and my co-hosts, that despite obviously taking D&D Beyond heavily under their own wing and having a few missteps along the way about how they're going to handle third-party content and user-created content, it seems now they're forging ahead with allowing select third-party content to be available on D&D Beyond. That's included things from publishers like MCDM with Flea Mortals, and just recently the Illrigger character class, which are created by MCDM, a sort of demon devil themed spellcast warrior. You can check that out now on there. As well as things like Dungeons of Drakkenheim, as well as the Blood Hunter from Matthew Mercer. Now, it seems that D&D Beyond is getting the Lord of the Rings role-playing game, which is not the One Ring 2nd edition, but it is an adaptation of that from Free League, wonderful Free League, who've made games like the Alien role-playing game, very, very popular. And Free League have made a 5th edition translation of the Lord of the Rings role-playing game, and that will be available on D&D Beyond. It seems that it has some interesting takes on it, though, as it has callings and heroic cultures instead of things like classes and species. And it also has a level cap of 10 rather than 20. Now, I've seen this around. I've spent a fair amount of time looking at upcoming RPGs, and I've looked at a lot of Free League's stuff too. And it seems that Lord of the Rings, it looks really cool. I've not had a chance to look at it myself, but it seems like it's a great resource for anybody that wants to dive into the lore of Lord of the Rings. Of course, things like Dungeons and Dragons wouldn't exist today if it weren't for the likes of Tolkien and Lord of the Rings. It was the desire to play in a world with orcs and elves and liches and dragons that spurned the creation of that game. So, as I mentioned earlier, it comes full circle. And now you can take your 5e games into the worlds of Lord of the Rings. I'll certainly give this a look. I've had my eye on the One Ring 2nd edition particularly, but perhaps this might be a good way to dive in first, as I, at least it sounds to some degree, already know the rule systems for it. So this will be available on D&D Beyond very soon. So check out the Lord of the Rings role-playing game. Last little bit here, and a subject close to my heart. We've talked a few times recently that Star Trek Adventures from Modiphius, the 2D20 system, I love it. I run a game of Fallout, which is 2D20 on a Thursday night. More on that soon. Well, Star Trek Adventures got its second edition lately with brand new core rulebooks that are available now, and they have just recently released, or I should say announced to be released in January in 2025, a starter set, retailing at £24 and is available on the UK and US stores for Modiphius. It features a rules booklet, a campaign booklet, ship and character sheets, because in the game your characters and your ship have their own character sheets, reference sheets, dice, and tokens to get you started in the worlds where you can explore the far reaches of space and go where no one has gone before, seeking new life and new civilizations wherever they might be found. I'm very interested in this. I'm not sure whether I'll pick up the starter set or not. I have a lot of the source books for first edition, and I certainly will be picking up the core rulebook very soon. I intend to grab that very, very soon. I actually created on our Rolldark Discord a dedicated channel to Star Trek. We got a sort of tentative one-shot off the ground. Sadly, that hasn't had any legs as of late. I'm hoping that I can get a few more players in on that very soon. I know that there's some dedicated folks who are keen to dive back in. Believe me, so am I. I really am. Things are just so busy, both professionally and privately for me at the minute. But once I get hold of the second edition core rulebook and get my head around the changes to the rules, which are few but significant from what I've read, then I will dive back in and see if we can get some players in and do some Star Trek themed games. And let me know if you're on the Discord and you're interested in Star Trek, or even if you're not on the Discord, head there. If you're interested in playing a tabletop role-playing game in the worlds of Star Trek, then let me know. Let me know what sort of Star Trek campaign you'd be interested in, what sort of era that you would like it to be set in. Of course, Star Trek spans a great plethora of different eras, from Enterprise in the original series right through to Discovery and beyond, Picard and so on, in the later centuries of the Star Trek canon, and everything in between, with the hugely popular Next Generation era and the Deep Space Nine era. I know there's a lot of diehard Voyager fans out there, and of course the original series. Speaking of that, I'm just going to have to tangent here for a moment. If you haven't seen the Unification short film, which is a sort of short 10-minute love letter to all of Star Trek, but it features James T. Kirk de-aged, and it's a wonderful love letter to not just the original series and the following movies, but Star Trek as a whole. It features characters and cameos within it that are just wonderful to see again. And the technology behind the creation of James Tiberius Kirk in this short film is nothing short of astonishing. It's a combination of de-aging technology and CGI and actual prosthesis, which the prosthesis is actually on an actor, and a well-known actor in the science fiction space, Sam Witwer. Very, very much popular on the Star Wars side of things. He does a lot of voicing for extremely popular characters in the animated shows, like Darth Maul and so forth. He's also been in things like Smallville. He's featured in some of the other Star Wars films, like Rogue One. He's featured in a solo Star Wars story. He also has a wonderful little cameo in Andor, which is a personal favorite Star Wars project from recent years of mine. He is the stormtrooper who arrests Andor on a beach. without going into too many spoilers if you haven't seen that show. And if you haven't and you like Star Wars, for goodness sake, give it a watch. Sam Witwer played James Kirk with prosthesis and de-aging technology, and there's some wonderful interviews with him about how that all came to be. Check it out if you're a Star Trek fan. It's heartwarming, it's tear-inducing, and it's a wonderful love letter to Star Trek. All of that is to say, if you're interested in Star Trek, let me know on the Discord or email me, damien@rolldark.co.uk, and let me know. And I'll see about getting a game off the ground for us, whether it be a 1, 2, or 3 shot similar, or a campaign in the future. All right. That's a cool 35 minutes of news. There's a lot to catch up on. We've not had a podcast for a couple of weeks for various reasons, so there's plenty to catch up on there. As it's just me, and it was an unexpected just me, it is going to be tales just from my tables this week. But if you have tales from your own tables, or if you're one of our Rolldark GMs and you want to submit tales from your tables from the Rolldark Marches or your weekly games, or you're a player and you want to do that, just let us know. Send it in on Discord or via email. Let us know your tales from the tables, and we'll read them out here on the podcast and give you a shout out for the wonderful adventures you're all getting involved in. My tales from the tables will be based on my 3 weekly games that I run for Rolldark. That's Odyssey of the Dragon Lords on a Monday night. We've just talked about that recently here on the episode. On Tuesday, it's Vecna, Eve of Ruin. And then on Thursday, as I mentioned, it's Fallout from Modiphius, the 2D20 system. Yes, that Fallout, based on the video game franchise set in the Commonwealth and the ruins of Old Boston. So, what have these folks been getting up to? It's been a wonderful few weeks for my games. I have to shout out every single one of my players across all 3 games. You're all absolutely killing it. Let's start on Monday night. Odyssey of the Dragon Lords. I've mentioned many times, if you're a listener of the podcast for more than a few episodes, you'll know this is Greek-themed, but not strictly Greek-themed. It is inspired by Greek mythology. It does not depict Greek mythology, but a sort of fantasy rendition inspired by Greek mythology. And my players are traveling across the lands of Thylia, which is the worlds in which it is set, on a great trireme, a great vessel. They're exploring the deep and unexplored oceans of the many islands that spread across the lands of Thylia. And most recently, it took them to an island which isn't Golden Path. It isn't the main story. But when you create a character in Odyssey of the Dragon Lords, each of your characters has what's called an epic path, which takes you through the story in a more personal way. You have your own reasons for getting involved in the main story, but you also have epic paths that take you to various parts of the worlds of Thylia to complete tasks and find out pieces of information and gather magical items in order to complete your epic destiny. And they're all sprinkled throughout the campaign so that it avoids going on too many tangents. It never feels like players either miss out on things they need to get to, nor does it feel like the other players are having to tag along while one player completes their task. It's wonderfully sprinkled throughout the main story and around the peripheral stories of that main campaign to allow players to pick them up as they go and experience the main story. So they were going to one of these more tangential islands, and it was an island where a lost god known as Helios, god of the sun, was said to reside. Golden god Helios. And upon arrival, it turned out it seemed they did exist. And Helios, the god of the sun, invited my players to eat beneath a warm blue sky in a beautiful sort of garden space with old ruins and things like that, served a feast across a table with wines and meads and meats and fruits and vegetables and all you could imagine, to find out what they were doing, why they were coming to this island, what did they want. And they admitted, after tentatively trying the food and not getting poisoned. I know what you're all thinking. GM puts a table full of food in front of you and says, have at it. Instant suspicion. Instant insight checks. Instant investigation checks. Instant detect magic. I know the drill. It's about as suspicious as a door in Dungeons and Dragons is a table full of food. But it wasn't dangerous. They consumed the food. and told Helios that they were there because they're trying to gather strength in order to defeat the Titans. There are two Titans who are the primary antagonists of the book. That isn't a spoiler. That's the basic premise of the book. And if you know anything about Greek mythology, you know the Titans not great anyway. That's not to say that the gods are either. But Titans not good. They were trying to stop the Titans, and unfortunately Helios admitted that he had already sworn an oath to the Titans to be on their side and train his Cyclops legions to fight in his war on his side. Through some negotiations and discovering that Helios was less than thrilled about sending what he called his children, his Cyclopes, off to battle, the players said, "We'll offer our greatest champion. You offer yours. It's a fight not to the death, but to defeat. And it's winner takes all." Helios agreed to this, but said, well, the only person on the island that I could consider my greatest champion, especially since I've sent most of them off to train for war, is me. So, knowing me, I'm going to give all of you a chance to fight me alone. And proceeded to transform into a adult golden dragon, which stunned the players. They were not at a recommended level to face an adult golden dragon. However, the gold dragon was in an area that didn't offer it lair actions. It had its legendary actions, but not lair actions, and also didn't have any minions or anything around it to help. And the landscape wasn't particularly detrimental either. And despite getting somewhat of a kicking from this dragon, the group were victorious, brought the dragon low, and as he transformed back into his humanoid appearance and effectively yielded, the group said, "We kept our end of the bargain, we're not going to kill you." And Helios admitted, well, I wasn't planning on keeping mine. One of the players has a doomed background, which all but forced Helios to have to try and defeat her. And by doing so, he broke his oath to the players. And so one of the Furies arrived. They arrive for people who egregiously break their word. Swearing an oath in Odyssey of the Dragon Lords is a serious deal. It's a big deal swearing an oath in Odyssey of the Dragon Lords, and you either end up cursed or taken by the Furies if you go back on any of those, or lie about them, or break them. The Fury showed up and took Helios away to the island of the Oathbreakers, leaving our players to try and make sure that the Cyclops on the island were on their side. Having defeated their god, they asked them to not take up arms at the side of the Titans, but instead at their side when the conflict comes to its head. This week, moving to a different island, I have to shout out the wonderful role-playing from all of the players in that game. This week, they're always great, but this week, in particular, one of the characters, a demigod character, has recently lost a character, an NPC, who was close to them, and is undergoing a period of grief. And as a barbarian, is channeling that grief into violence. And one of the other characters in the party is having a hard time dealing with that. She's having a hard time reconciling with Helicon, who has been up until this point a powerful but gentle giant, now giving into his more violent urges. And she's fearful that she's going to lose him. And there was this wonderful combination of role-playing between the two of them and the other characters around them, speaking to them individually about how to deal with this rift in the group, and revealing that our demigod character is having a hard time connecting to anybody in fear that they're going to lose them, and that this other character who has deep love and friendship for this demigod character having a hard time understanding any of what's going on because they have never lost anybody. They're new to this whole losing people thing and don't understand how it affects the people around them, and they're therefore having a hard time reconciling with leaving Helikaon to his devices to grieve, even if that grieving process looks to be detrimental to him. There were tears, there was wonderful words of advice and fellowship, and it's just role-playing at the highest order. So I have to shout out every single one of you from Odyssey of the Dragonlords. You guys are absolutely killing it. You're making the story a true Greek epic, and I just every week look forward to seeing where it goes. So thank you all. You know who you are. Tuesday nights. We'll quickly touch on this. Vecna Eve of Ruin. This is a Wizards of the Coast published adventure, the most recent one, the final one of 5e before its revised rules. A multiversal hopping adventure. My players have recently found themselves in one of the realms within that campaign. It's not Forgotten Realms, it's beyond that, but I'm not going to say what it is for spoilers' sake. However, it was been a lot of chaotic fun because they found themselves battling in a vertical cylindrical tunnel, which spanned approximately 100 feet in height, with different levels that could be latched onto and different rooms spreading out from those levels at intervals up into that tower. And they got split fairly evenly from the bottom, middle, and top of the tower due to various circumstances, and found themselves pinned between a rock and a hard place, quite literally, as a stone golem was climbing up the tower from the bottom, having fallen, and the villains of this particular area, I'll get my words out, this particular area were at the top. And they hit hard, they hit fast, and there were multiples of them. And so the players found themselves getting sort of pincered between these two threats and having to deal with that across multiple vertical levels of combat, with flight and climbing and falling and line of sight and all of these things. And it was a really cool and mad chaotic encounter using verticality as opposed to your standard room-to-room dungeon. And it was a really interesting fight. They were successful. Nobody was too severely hurt, although it was looking touch and go for a while. But they defeated the villains, they got what they were looking for, and travelled back to their sort of hub world, again, the location of which I won't spoil, to find out where they're going next. And to say that they're thrilled about where they're going next is an understatement. They're going to a very popular setting in the worlds of Dungeons & Dragons, and I am very excited about exploring it with them. It is a separate campaign that I would like to run myself, and so this will be a nice taster on potentially running that campaign in the future. That's all I'll say for now, as I don't want to spoil the locations you can visit should you wish to join. Unfortunately, my game is fully subscribed on Tuesday, but if you're interested in Vecna Eve of Ruin, let us know. There are other games available for it. So again, hit us up on the Discord or email if you're interested in joining that game. And then Thursday. My Thursday game is Fallout, using the 2d20 system from Modifius. So not a 5e game. It's a different rule set, an interesting and elegant one that perfectly replicates the video game feel of Fallout, in particular the feel of Fallout 4, which I know isn't necessarily everyone's favourite Fallout game, but mechanically it mirrors that very well. And its default setting for this campaign is actually the Commonwealth and Boston from Fallout 4. And it is called Winter of Atom, and is a full campaign set in a nuclear winter. And the players are juggling moral quandaries all over the place, because many of the settlements, both from the game and new ones for the campaign, feature people who are struggling against a nuclear winter and survival. Places that are overpopulated with refugees and survivors from the Commonwealth, unable to make it on their own, out in the winter, the frozen, irradiated snow. Don't eat irradiated snow, by the way, unless you're a ghoul and you need some healing. And they're struggling with the moral quandaries that this brings up, because the settlements aren't necessarily willing to work together. and they're facing threats from within and without that are causing a great deal of problems for the players because they often find themselves having to try and side with one faction or another, all the while trying to see what is going on with the Church of the Children of Atom, whose numbers seem to be swelling lately, although their intentions, as yet, don't seem to be at all malevolent. So it's interesting to see what's really going on in that central mystery. The players recently dealt with a horde of frozen ghouls, and in doing so rescued a settlement called Meckminster Abbey. Yes, you heard that right, Meckminster Abbey, which features a bunch of forge nuns, nuns who have devoted themselves to the fire of the forge, converted the lectern of an old church into a forge, and provide repair and weapons and armor to the Commonwealth. One of the other problems they've had, aside from the frozen feral ghouls, was drug trafficking, or I should say chem trafficking, and their chem trafficker is actually the individual who approached my team of players and told them about the problems Meckminster is having. And the reason they did that was because they're feeling a little hot under the collar. The nuns are onto them about who's pushing the chems in their congregation, and they don't want chems in their congregation. And so his idea was, hey, I tell you that they're having problems, you go deal with it, you tell them I sent you, and suspicion falls immediately away from me. How does that sound? Having completed the mission, they did let the Reverend Riveter, the leader of the community, know that it was this individual who was pushing the chems, but convinced both of them to have a conflab together with the view to potentially have this chem pusher make more profit through pushing only medicinal chems instead of the more detrimental and addictive ones, citing the fact that they stand to make a lot more money when everybody in the community needs medical chems, where only people who are addicted want the non-medicinal chems, and also the people who run the community don't want it in their community anyway. So they stand to make a lot more money, or caps, from selling medicinal chems. And tentatively, the Reverend Riveter agreed to have this meeting and made this individual, who went by the enigmatic name Tripper, to swear allegiance to Meckminster Abbey and only bring medicinal chems from now on, by having him hold a red-hot tool, a wrench, and swear for as long as it took to swear this oath, holding onto this red-hot wrench, at which point he home aloned it out into the snow and buried his hand in the snow. So suitably confident that they dealt with that moral quandary in the best way possible, hoping that that doesn't come back to bite them in the backside later, the group has headed out now to a location called Big Top, which is a circus that rolled its way into the Commonwealth and has been grounded by the nuclear winter, and has set up shop and, unfortunately, as everywhere else, become something of a refugee center. But being only a circus, and the circus performers within, they don't have the resources to sustain all of these people, and are having to make deals with other factions surrounding them, including the Children of the Church of Atom. And so this has led our group to try and work out what interest the Children of the Church of Atom would have in a circus, and how they can help the community of Big Top solve their problem of dwindling resources. They recently met a Protectron unit whose goes by the name of Deputy D3N-Z3L, who claims that they fled a military bunker when they were attacked by raiders and needs help going to clear out the raiders and get the information that's contained within the bunker, because this Protectron believes it pertains to a bigger picture here in the Commonwealth of a greater threat. And so in the closing minutes of our session last night, they headed out to this bunker with this Protectron unit and were trying to hack the terminal to get into this secure bunker. And a radiation storm, a rad-izzard, struck and is currently battering down on them, irradiating them as they're making saving throws each turn while they try desperately to hack into this terminal. and we left our cliffhanger with our nurse handy robot. Yes, you can play a handy in the Fallout role-playing game, trying to use literally blind luck, which is a stat, not just blind luck, but an actual stat of blind luck to just hit the keys on this terminal and hopefully stumble onto the hacking password to get in. As the radiation storm swelled around them, they were unsuccessful, save after save after save. And so they're in a bit of a, I was going to say a hot spot, a tight spot. Certainly not hot, it's the opposite. It's very cold spot as they desperately try to get into this bunker and hope that what is within is safer than the radiation blizzard outside. Lots of fun Fallout. It's violent, it's funny, there's a lot of moral quandaries, there's a deep central mystery going on, and there's everything from the Fallout games you might love. Robots, crazy characters, crazy locations, all the weapons from the game that you can picture, with a scope to eventually get hold of things like Fat Mans and Gauss rifles and power armor and all that sort of cool stuff. It's a mad, crazy 50s retro future inspired time, post-apocalyptic, of course. If you're a fan of Fallout, or just a fan of science fiction in general, and you want to try something different to Dungeons & Dragons, there are currently spaces available in Fallout on a Thursday night, 7:30 through to 11:30, via Zoom for video and Roll20 for maps and combat. So again, let me know on Discord or by email if you would like to join Fallout. Okay, that's going to wrap us up, just short of a cool hour. Hopefully you have enjoyed listening to me rattle on for that time solo. Hopefully next week we'll have all of our co-hosts back. James, Rob, JC, I miss you all. I look forward to talking more Tales from the Tables with you, and hopefully some of our listeners too. With that being said, head over to rolldark.co.uk, find your game of choice, talk to us on the Discord, and until next week, roll dice, have fun, tell some cool tales, and share them with us. I'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.